Hey, let's talk about the other big piece of news that came out in the last few days. That collectives, you heard a scream from above, which was my dad, but now came the scream from Flushing. Jacob Degrom, beloved ace of the New York Metropolitans, signed how many years? 5 years
I think
with
like
the Texas
6.
Rangers. Was it 6?
I got to double check.
It was a lot. It was many years
A lot of years, a lot of money.
that he signed, and
You're
Met
right.
fan. Like I got a text from my cousin Dave, who is a rabid Met fan. Danielle Sepulveri's, whose name I always mispronounce. I'm sorry,
That was
Danielle.
tough.
But probably the biggest Met fan I know. You would have thought there was a death in her family if you read her Twitter feed. Look, I don't mean to be cold-hearted here, but yes, emotionally, it's going to stink to see Jacob Degrom in another uniform if you're a Mets fan. But let's remember one thing here. Let's just be real. DeGrom's a great pitcher, okay? DeGrom's won back-to-back Cy Young Awards. When DeGrom is on the mound, he's one of the 3 or 4 best pitchers in all of baseball. I think we can all say that.
Mm-hmm.
He made 11 starts last year. 11. He made 15 starts the year before. An ace, you'd like to have between 25 to 30 starts a year. He's given them 26 starts over the last 2 years. Okay? The gigantic chunks where DeGrom was, when Jacob comes back, he'll be rested. He's going to be, he is right now, according to baseballreference.com, he's going to turn 35 in June.
Whew.
35. Because we have these images of these pitchers coming up as young superstars, we forget the fact he's pitched for 9 years. 9, which is also German for no.
Mm.
And again, I totally understand why the Mets would have signed him, but you and I both know that there is a real possibility that he's going to break down in Texas. Could he come back and be a Justin Verlander reclamation project? Yes. They brought in Bruce Bochy to manage, who has a great reputation of working with pitchers. Absolutely. But this is an injury-prone pitcher who the Mets have done everything except put him in a bubble to prevent him from getting injured. And he still gets injured all the time. And so the idea that the Mets are going to lose out on him, well, they lost out on him for all but 11 games last year.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not belittling him. When he's on the mound, he's great. But he's almost never on the mound.
Yeah, that's an issue. They say the best ability is availability. And for the Mets, I get it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of years. And Jacob Degrom is a huge health risk. And it just sucks for that fan base because Jacob Degrom is such a historic figure, such a big figure in Mets lore, literally one of the most historic pitchers we've seen in baseball of the last 20 years. And the idea of someone like that walking when the Mets just got this new owner who's willing to spend money on pretty much every MLB superstar, but you let someone of DeGrom's caliber, albeit we know the risk, but you still let him walk. It is shocking for Mets fans. And now you look at that Mets rotation, something that was a strength. You looked at the depth of that rotation last year. It was their strength, but now DeGrom's gone. Chris Bassett's a free agent. Taijuan Walker's a free agent. All of a sudden, it's Max Scherzer. It's David Peterson, Carlos Carrasco. Still a pretty good rotation, but now it's who are they going to go after next? The Mets feel like these sharks in the water just circling around these big-time free agents that are still available. The Justin Verlanders, that seems to be maybe the Mets' next big target in free agency. Someone like Carlos Rodon, a little bit younger, strikeout artist too. But I think the most fun narrative would be for the Mets to go after Justin Verlander just because we get the reunion of Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander together once again.
If you asked me a week ago, I would have said that Verlander, it was a lock to go back to Houston. Now I think both Los Angeles and the 2 New York teams, and for, the Angels should be playing footsie with them too. But I think both New York teams and the Dodgers should be salivating to bring him in, and I think he will probably leave the Astros. It wouldn't surprise me. I think maybe the signing of Abreu was, well, we got to start doing something to move on. The Astros have a ton of pitchers. And remember, Verlander didn't pitch in 2021 when they went to the World Series. This was a comeback season for him. And he's older than DeGrom, of course. But I think Verlander has at least one more very good season. I mean, I think Scherzer does as well. As for Texas, for all my talk about, with this, signing to a long-term deal may not be the right thing, I am reminded of a Red Sox Hall of Famer from 2004 who did, in fact, sign with the Mets, who was Pedro Martinez, my single favorite player in the history of baseball. When he signed with the Mets after the 2004 World Series, he gave them one very good season, and then he kind of fell. The injuries caught up. We all knew he was going to break down. But that acquisition of Martinez kind of changed the culture a little bit in netdom. And they got to within one swing of the World Series the next year. I wonder if bringing in a DeGrom, even if it's just for the first year or so, to sort of change around the mindset to say, hey, folks, we're going to try this. We're going to make a run at the Astros. The management's behind us. They brought in Bochy. They brought in DeGrom. Maybe that psychological factor of the Rangers are here to play is as important as anything that you find as a number on baseballreference.com, the single race website.
Yeah, for the Rangers, here's the thing. I love the philosophy. I love the strategy. I love the idea of going out there in free agency and spending the money on stars. They did it last year with the Corey Seagers, the Marcus Semens. They signed a John Gray too. I'm not that big. I'm not that big of a John Gray guy. But then they went out there and got Jacob Degrom this year. I love the philosophy of throwing money at big time free agents and talent because you need talented players on your roster to make real postseason runs. But I don't think the Rangers were in the place where they should have gone after these big time free agents because they were basically starting at square one when you look at their team last offseason. That is one of the worst rosters in baseball entering last year's offseason. And all they did was basically throw like the old adage, put some makeup on a pig, because this roster still isn't very good. They're still going to have so many holes around all this big time money that they now tied up the middle and into a Jacob Degrom. I just don't think it's going to really push them too far into the postseason. Like, I would have understand making these moves if you're the Rangers, if you weren't that far away from competing, if you had a roster like, say, the D-backs, we have a whole bunch of young talent in your lineup. You got a Zach Gallen, you got a Merrill Kelly as well. Now you're like, okay, we're adding the Corey Seagers and the Marcus Semien and the Jacob Degroms to that roster. Now, if you add, if you take the D-backs team from last year and add those three stars to it, now you're looking at a real World Series roster. Even a team like the Miami Marlins with that pitching staff, they got Jazz, but they really need offensive players. If you do a Corey Seager and a Marcus Semien on that team, that Jacob Degrom, you're looking at that team as a World Series roster. But for this Texas Rangers team, where they were starting from last year, they were nowhere near competing. They were years away. They just needed to add pieces. They needed some quality young talent. They've been trying to rebuild through the draft. It wasn't working out for them. So they were like, let's go out there and spend some money in free agency. But the problem was they were so far and deep into their rebuilding process. Signing these star free agents, I just don't think is going to move the needle that much for them. They're going to be a borderline 500 team, but I just don't see how they're really going to be able to push themselves into playoff contention. I think it's just going to be a few more years where the Rangers just kind of muddling around 500. They got a lot of money locked up into these stars, and they're going to be banking a lot on these stars because, like we're talking about Jacob Degrom as a health risk, like if he doesn't pay off and if he's not there on the field every day making 30 starts a season, like this could be a disaster for the Rangers, because I love the idea of spending money, but I don't like how they started their team with their team building from last offseason and just basically how they built it. I love the idea of throwing money at stars, but I don't think they were the right team to start doing it.
Well, you're the right guy to be doing a podcast with every Monday. So, hey, Millard Thomas, thanks so much for being here, as you always are every Monday, talking Hall of Fame and talking DeGrom. Tell people where they can follow your great show.
You can follow me on Twitter at CreoThomas24 for my personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. We're on all your streaming platforms, and we're on YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
And thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. For your next listen, obviously make it Locked On Diamondbacks. But then check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. I am your co-host, normally the host of Locked On MLB. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. You can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast and Instagram, talking about how they pick these Hall of Famers. This has been the Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. He's Millard Thomas. I'm Sully. I'm going to have some dinner. Time to fist pump.